The High Warden didn't look at the holographic maps or the flickering distress signals screaming from every corner of the sector. He looked at the trembling hands of the High Archivist of the Valerians, a being whose species had lived in unbroken, crystalline peace for 10 millennia. The golden alien was vibrating, a literal hum of terror that threatened to shatter its own translucent skin. Kalen reached out and gripped the Archivist's shoulder, his thumb pressed into the cold, hard facet of the alien's collarbone, anchoring him. A hand reaching out in the dark is more powerful than a moon-cracking cannon. Kalen felt the sharp, jagged edges of the Archivist's fear, but his own heart beat with the slow, rhythmic thud of a man who had seen the lights go out before. The etheric ring's summit had been a display of impossible opulence until 3 minutes ago. Zenith Prime was a world of floating spires and singing gardens, a testament to civilizations that had forgotten the meaning of the word friction. Then the void pulse hit. It wasn't an explosion, it was a subtraction. The Omni-Gate network, the golden highway of the galaxy, simply ceased to exist. In an instant, the ancient empires were severed, their colonies silenced, and their gods rendered deaf. The Grand Chamber was a shipwreck of ego. Lords of systems that span nebulae were wailing, their sophisticated minds unable to process a universe that didn't respond to a voice command. They were masters of stability, and because of that, they were fragile. Kalen stood up, his recycled leather boots creaking against the polished floor. He looked at his small human delegation, 4 technicians and a pilot who were already opening heavy, battered cases of analog gear. They weren't screaming, they were working. The truth was, the galaxy forgot how to struggle. Humanity made it an art form. Kalen's mind drifted back to the history vids he'd studied as a boy. The collapse of the early Martian colonies, the great darkening of 2088, the long winter. While these elder races were building Dyson spheres, humans were perfecting the art of the backup plan. They were the scavengers of the stars, the people who kept a flashlight and a mechanical wrench under the seat of a warp-capable shuttle, just in case. We aren't special, Kalen thought as he watched a panicked Duke of the Hegemony try to restart a dead terminal with frantic, useless gestures. We just have more practice at falling apart. He walked to the center of the dais, ignoring the guards who were too busy hyperventilating to stop him. He pulled a small, heavy brass cylinder from his belt. It was an old-fashioned shortwave burst transmitter, a relic of the era before the gates. He clicked the toggle. The mechanical snap sounded like a gunshot in the cavernous silence of the hall. Out in the black, tucked into the Lagrange points of 1,000 suns, tiny metal boxes began to wake up. They were low-tech, clunky, and ignored by every census for 3 centuries, but they were there. The little chain of campfires that nobody respected was still burning. The first response came through as a grainy, audio-only hiss. It was a human voice, calm and bored, speaking from a freighter 3 systems away. Kalen felt a surge of something hot and sharp in his chest, not pride, but a grim, familiar recognition. The static on the receiver wasn't a song. It was a heartbeat. Kalen looked at the High Archivist, whose glowing skin had dimmed to a sickly, translucent gray. The alien society was built on the Omni-Gate, a network of instant travel that functioned like a nervous system. Now that the system was dead, the Archivist was effectively paralyzed, staring at a universe that had suddenly grown too large to comprehend. Kalen didn't offer a speech about destiny. He offered a physical reality. He grabbed the Archivist's hand and pressed it against the cold, vibrating metal of the short-wave receiver. The alien flinched, its fingers twitching against the brass casing, but Kalen held firm until the Archivist felt the rhythmic pulse of the signal. It was the beacon chain, a series of low-tech, automated buoys humanity had spent centuries tucking into the cracks of the galaxy. They didn't fold space. They didn't defy physics. They just screamed into the dark, one to the next, like a line of weary runners passing a torch. The High Warden turned back to the center of the hall. The cosmic singularity, the entity the elder races had worshipped as a silent, mathematical god, was drifting closer to Zenith Prime. To the Valerians, it was an encroaching apocalypse. To Kalen, watching the way it pulled at the atmosphere and devoured the stray energy of the dead gates, it looked like something else entirely. It looked like a stray dog sniffing at an empty bowl. He didn't fire the defense cannons. Instead, he signaled the human freighter on the other end of the burst link. "This is Warden Kalem. Dispatch the fuel tankers. Dump the raw plasma into the orbit of the fourth moon. All of it. Now." The archivist made a sound like breaking glass. "You are feeding it? You would offer our last reserves to the devourer?" "It isn't a devourer," Kalen said, his voice raspy from the recycled air. "It's hungry, and it's lost. You treated it like a god because it was bigger than you. We're treating it like a guest because we know what it's like to have nothing." As the plasma hit the vacuum, blooming in the dark like a neon cloud, the singularity slowed. The crushing pressure on the station eased. The entity drifted toward the artificial feast, its terrifying gravity stabilizing as its immediate physiological need was met. The void pulse didn't end, but it softened. The galaxy stopped screaming. In the quiet that followed, the solar accord wasn't signed with shimmering light or ancient oaths. It was signed with a physical exchange of coordinates, the old slow routes that didn't rely on the gates. Kalen watched as the lords of the etheric ring began to cluster around the human technicians, learning how to read a paper map and how to listen to the hiss of a radio. The old empires were gone, shattered by their own perfection. In their place stood a fragile, messy collective of survivors. Kalen walked to the observation deck, watching the singularity settle into the orbit of the dead moon, sated and still. The archivist stood beside him, no longer humming with terror, but watching the distant tiny lights of the human rescue fleet as they began the long, slow trek across the void. "You knew," the archivist whispered, its voice thin. "You knew the gates would fail one day." Kalen leaned against the cold glass, feeling the ache in his joints and the weight of the years. "We didn't know," he said. "We just remembered what it felt like to be left in the dark." He looked out at the stars, no longer a highway, but a wilderness again. It was a terrifying, beautiful distance, and for the first time in 10,000 years, the galaxy was ready to learn how to walk it.